Alrighty, so today with our Cape Cod ecosystems, we are going to learn it through what is called systems thinking. Now, our lesson today is geared a little bit more towards middle and high school level, but there is activity that a younger, maybe elementary age could do, and also some of the ideas that are definitely age friendly for them. So we're going to cover kind of a wider range. From lower to higher level thinking, and then we're just going to do the best that we can. My name is Haley Curry. I work as a summer program educator here at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, and I am also a high school science teacher. So I am, again, we're geared a little bit more towards that higher level, but everyone is more than welcome to be on, and there is a really fun activity for the younger kids and then also for the older kids. So today we're going to be focusing on the Cape Cod ecosystem. And I should just say one of many. The Cape is home to many beautiful ecosystems, such as salt marshes, shrub forest, dune beaches. And we are going to kind of focus a little bit more on the marine today. And we're going to be doing this through an idea of systems thinking. So to start off, we kind of want to center ourselves in the world. So here, the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy is located on Cape Cod in Chatham. And for those of you who don't know, that is in the US of A and then in Massachusetts. So we are located right here on our eastern seaboard. And if we zoom in a little bit, this is the Cape. So we're located right in here. And Cape Cod is very special for a lot of reasons. One, it is not your traditional Cape. We are not really formed so much from longshore currents, but we are rather formed from glaciers. So in our last glacial ice age, there was a lot of sand that was piled up. So at the edges of glaciers, as it melted, retreated, it was able to push and dump sand, which formed the Cape and Islands. So what makes this special is we don't have bedrock. So we have a lot of erosion, we have a lot of changing currents, a lot of different ocean tides, and we do see big changes to our outer arm. And the reason I'm mentioning this is just if you are from here or the area, you know that things do change. So when we're talking about these systems and ecosystems, it's important to know that our habitats can change. So we do have a vocabulary sheet that is up on our website at the moment that you're more than welcome to look at, and we're just going to kind of go through some base vocab words that are going to help us later on. So we're going to start off small and get bigger. System, it is a set of things that work together. So a bunch of things are systems. The engine in your car is a system. Your computer running is a system. Your family unit is a system. Your classroom is a system. It's just as long as things are working together, they're going to be that system. When we're talking about an ecosystem, focusing on the biological community, so and how they interact with their environment. So when we think about that, it's how a bird interacts with a tree. And inside that tree, maybe there are bugs, and that bird is eating the bugs that live in the tree. And when the tree falls, it'll decompose, and those nutrients go back in the soil, and then a new tree will grow. When we're talking about ecosystems, again, it's a system. We're focusing a little bit more on the biology within there. The next two are very connected. So you might have learned from our food chain talk that a food chain is just basically a series of organisms that are dependent on each other. So, right, that bug needs the tree. It eats nutrients from the tree. Then a bird eats the bug. And the tree is getting its energy from the sun. So that is a food chain. It is just it's just one line. When we start to think a little bit bigger and how things are interconnected, we move to food webs. So it's a system of interlocking food chains. So when we go back to that example, when we see a tree, we know it's not just the insects eating the tree. The bird also sometimes might eat some seeds or nuts that fall from the tree. There are squirrels that eat from the tree. There's a lot of things that are going on. And so it creates a very complicated web. if you look behind me, you may be able to see this is a very complicated system web, and it has a food web within it. Moving on to systems thinking. So I teach systems thinking for a couple reasons. I was first introduced to it when I was in high school, and I think that it is a great skill to learn because it is applicable in any job, any walk of life, any situation. And the idea of systems thinking is that it's a way of thinking that takes into account every part of that system and how everything is connected. So pretty much it's just knowing that every action that you have has a consequence. And sometimes you know what that consequence is, and sometimes you don't. And that's okay. I've talked before, and tell myself this every time, I tell my students this every day. Everything that we do has an action. And if it's a negative action, you make a mistake and you don't do it again. So when we're thinking about systems, just like how in your everyday life, maybe you've noticed that if you have a brother or sister and you maybe help them pick up their toys or clean the dishes when you're done with something, you might get rewarded with something like ice cream. I know that's the case in my family. Or if you do something bad, quote unquote, that sometimes it's just an accident, borrowing your sister's sweatshirt without asking, that can have an unforeseen consequence and you don't see it. But so systems thinking helps in your day-to-day life, but also in these huge systems. So when we have that tree, the worm, the bird, if we were to all of a sudden take away the worms, what would happen to that system? The bird now might not have that food source, but also you're not having those insects that are going to be helping that tree to decay when it does die. So it's this huge system and everything's connected, and it can be hard to think about. We have two different types of actions, really. So we have a positive feedback, which that action is going to keep occurring. And it tends to be bad for the system. It's like a giant snowball, right? If you go out in the winter and you're making a snowman and you start rolling, when you roll the snow, more snow sticks to it, and then it just keeps going and going and going. So these positive feedback loops a lot of times are necessary to make a big change, but a lot of times they do tend to kind of negatively affect that system. And a lot of times it happens when something is inserted or changed in that system that normally doesn't happen. So we started seeing this a lot with just humans. When they would go to a new environment, when something would happen, they would change something about the environment. And a lot of times that would kind of cause things to get out of control before things could get better. And that's okay. We're learning, and we've come to understand so much because of that. We also have negative feedback loops, which tend to actually be good for the system. They reset things. So it's when one action causes that opposite action to occur. So a lot of times this is how we get everything back on track. We don't have to worry about these two too much for what we're doing today. I just wanted to bring it in because we are talking about our systems thinking. And we also have our steady state, which is a system that is not changing. So it's just kind of existing. All the parts are working. It's going great. So if you are doing your vocabulary sheet, you can pause here to kind of write them all down. I'm just going to kind of keep moving on. We're going to now talk about our system. So when we talk about an ecosystem, we are normally focusing on the organisms within it, the biological life. Looking at it through this system thinking approach, we also want to look at other things that affect it. So I'm going to go through, I believe there are 13 of these playing cards that you can look through, and each one of them has a role in this system, and then there's a little description about them. So we have, to start off on the Cape, our local fishermen are extremely important. And they are a little bit out of order so that you guys can do the activity and have more fun with it. So we have our local fishermen. A lot of times these are local family businesses. There aren't a lot of licenses, so a lot of times they're passed down through generations, or you grow up fishing. It's a small industry, and it's can be a little bit hard to get into, but it's small, it's very local. These people who are fishermen, fisherwomen, they know their fisheries extremely well, and they care so much. They know that they need to have a sustainable fishery to keep fishing. When we say sustainable, we mean we can't fish all the fish in the ocean, or else we wouldn't have any more. So we've learned that over the years. That's not something that when people started fishing, we didn't just, that idea wasn't there to start with. It kind of came and we learned through making mistakes. When we're talking about sharks, we have two that I focus on this, our great whites and our makos, just because those, we talk about great whites a lot here, and makos are one of my favorite sharks, so I put them on these cards. So our larger species of sharks, great whites feed on seals, large game fish, makos are feeding on larger fish, and our great whites we have seen come back to our area. Now, sharks were hunted in this area after Jaws was released, and that was because of this misconception that sharks are manhunters and they prey on humans, which is not true at all. So now we've learned from that, right? It was something that was made up. We made a terrible mistake in our ecosystem by killing these beautiful animals, and our ecosystem suffered because of it. We also have our seals. So I put sharks and seals here because there is an important point that I want to talk about with them. Our seals eat all sized fish. They can eat in great quantities. They were once hunted also because they were thought to eat all the fish. And they're super important to our ecosystem. So seals, yes, they eat a lot of fish, and that's okay. We have a really healthy amount of seals in our ecosystem. When you have too much of one thing, sometimes it can cause disbalance. So you need to have predators in your ecosystem to make sure that the tier down from them is kept at a healthy level. That keeps disease out of these populations. It makes sure that everything's staying at a sustainable level. So what that group eats and what it has, there's going to be enough of it because everything keeps itself in check. Ecosystems are amazing at balancing things. It's very, very cool. So our seals used to eat a lot of fish, okay? And our sharks eat our seals. So once upon a time, we had a huge fishery, right? It boomed. So many people were making a lot of money. We had local fishermen, we had industrial fishermen, and we fished too much. So we didn't have enough fish to keep producing more fish. So an idea was, okay, well, if our seals eat all of our fish, if we get rid of the seals, we will have more fish. And in a linear concept, that makes total sense. But it didn't work. The seals are what keep our fish in check, the population level. So without our seals at a healthy level, our fish weren't kept at a healthy level. So it was one of those things where we had an idea, we thought it would work, and it didn't because we didn't look at the full system. And also we didn't really understand. Now that we have sharks back, they're indicative of seals being at good population levels. You can't have the top of the food chain, the apex predator, if there's nothing for it to eat. And now that we have our sharks back, it's showing that our ecosystem is healthy again, which is really, really exciting. So kind of moving on with more fish and fishermen, we do have orcas. So these are not necessarily native to the area. They feed on seals and large game fish. And in recent years, they have been observed to prey on sharks, which is really interesting. Again, we don't know a lot about the ocean. It is not as studied as it could be, and we're learning every day, and that's okay. We also have codfish, so I put these codfish in here separate from small fish and from large fish because of what they have done for the Cape. They're extremely popular. They are bottom feeders. Fishing cod is what drove people to this area. Okay, this was the main fishery. The young live in the bottom environment, and the bottom environment can be hurt by trawl nets. So these are kind of what started our huge fishing industry. So then we move on to our industrial fishermen. They have lots of funding to have large boats. They can stay out for weeks at a time. A lot of times they'll use trawl nets, and trawl nets, like we learned in codfish, can affect our seafloor bottom. They can also have a lot of bycatch. So that's something, right? You put a net out and you're only looking for one thing, but you get 10 things. So they throw all the rest back. So what happened here is we're seeing a lot of industrial fishermen what you got, like the fishing industry is amazing. It's great and it's changed a lot over the years. But we did have that overfishing. We fished too much. And that's because we got better at what we were doing. All of a sudden we have fish finders and we have boats that can go longer, bigger nets, stronger cranes. You were just so much more efficient at what they were doing, and the fisheries couldn't keep up. And we've learned, and from there now we have more sustainable fishing methods. We also have our sport fish. These are popular white meat fish. Think about striped bass, swordfish, bluefish, tuna. A lot of times this is what you go on a chartered fishing trip for. And these are fish that a lot of people want at a restaurant. Swordfish, striped bass, great stuff. So these are our larger fish. And then we have our smaller fish. So the big fish eat the little fish. They have a smaller commercial value, so not as many people are actively fishing them, but they're a very important step in our food chain. And then we have plankton, which are at the base of our food chain. So zooplankton are animals, so zoo, plant, and these mostly are larvae, so the little small organisms that are eventually going to grow into real fish. We also have phytoplankton, which are our plants, so they get their energy from photosynthesis, just like our trees, grass, and flowers, and they are the base of our food chain. We also have things that are not necessarily directly involved, right? They're not like fishermen who are going out and actively taking a fish out of the ocean. They're not like a big fish who's eating a small fish or a small fish that's eating plankton. These are bigger ideas that have affected it, and it's not right for us to talk about systems thinking and ignore them. So we talked about how seals were hunted, but in 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act decided to stop that you cannot harm, harass, hunt, capture, kill any marine mammal. So that saved our seals. No longer was there seal nose bounty hunting. They have to be protected. You cannot harass or hurt or steal. And with that, our seal population came back. So that directly ties into our seals. We also have our tourists. On the Cape, our tourists are a hugely important factor. They are important to our local economy. They come to see the beauty of the Cape. They come to enjoy all of our ecosystems. They eat our local fish. They're kind of what drives life here on the Cape. And we need to know that as humans living on the Cape, we are a part of our ecosystem now. Us leaving trash at the beach, us choosing to eat in a sustainable way with fish. It all has a huge effect on our ecosystem. And in the summer, we grow so much. We have so many more people, and it's amazing. They come, they're able to see the beauty of the Cape, enjoy our oceans, see this beautiful ecosystem that we have. So it's important that we include them when we're thinking about our system. We also have ocean conservation. There are a lot of ocean conservation groups. We at the Conservancy are one of them. There are seal conservation groups. There are turtle conservation groups. What conservation does is it wants to educate the masses. It wants to explain why it's important that we protect these things. We keep this ecosystem as close to how it was as possible, and how we can be sustainable in our practices so that this is something that we have forever. Right? We don't want it just to be something that in the year 2020 we can enjoy. We want it to go on forever and ever and make sure that everyone understands how important that is. And it's a really amazing thing because ocean conservation, they work closely with fishermen. We have the Cape Cod Fishermen's Alliance they make so much headway on sustainable fishing practices and having sustainable fisheries. And that is amazing. If you ever have a chance to go down to the Chatham Fish Pier and talk to some of our local fishermen, they're amazing. They have some great stories, and they'll tell you how important it is that we fish in a really healthy way. And finally, we have systems thinking, which encompasses all of this. Systems thinking is relatively new in the world of science. We have learned that things don't always respond the way we thought they would, which I'm sure all of you have experienced in life. You do something and expect one action, and sometimes you get an unexpected consequence. So when we're learning and when we're kind of going forward and we're taking new steps to try different things in conservation or helping or solving different environmental problems, you have to look at the system as a whole, and it is not always easy. So I have a couple projects that you guys can do to learn about this. So first, why do we care? I kind of talked about this. And I think it's really important that we learn about systems thinking. One, because it helps you make kind of better decisions. If you really think something through, you're able to create a little bit more of, if you definitely want to make that action and you think about all the consequences, positive and negative, you have to weigh those out. Sometimes the positive outweighs the negative, and sometimes the negative outweighs the positive. And we care because we want this to be here forever. You know, I want to be able to come back to the Cape summer after summer, someday bring my grandchildren and children here. We want it to be here and be healthy and be happy so we can see these beautiful creatures, see this beautiful ecosystem and have it forever. So on our website, there is a PDF of the cards that I showed you here. They are a little on the ink heavy side. So we also made these little cutouts, which I used for my map. But that is because I'm not the best artist. So if you want, you can draw all of these yourself, which is very fun. And it's a beautiful day out, so maybe you could go outside and draw. So with these, we have two different activities. So we have one that's meant for some of our younger kids, which is just very simply a food web puzzle. And for this one, you only need, sport fish, which are going to be your large fish, small fish, plankton, seals, shark, and orcas. So you only need those guys. And you can try to make this little puzzle. For kids who maybe want a little bit more of a challenge, or adults, this is very fun. You can do a systems map. So this is a small version of it, and up here is the big version. So what you do is you cut out or you make all of the aspects of your system, and then you work to figure out how they connect. Now there are so many different ways to do it, and there could be a lot more arrows on this if I spent. The more time you spend, the more arrows you have. So eventually you just kind of have to cut yourself off. I used 3 different colors. So I used the blue one here is for my food chain or food web. My pink is for my economic. And then my purple is for conservation. So I did that just for me because I like to think about things in a little bit different of a way. You could just, it's kind of the world's yours. You can do one color and just see how things are connected. You could see if you could make different categories. It's all up to you. And this is just the Cape Cod ecosystem. So if you're familiar with the area or you feel like I gave you enough information, do this one and it's super fun. If you want to do it for wherever you're from, I highly encourage that. If you are from let's say Montana and you live in the mountains, we would love to see what your type of system looks like. What are the parts of your ecosystem that are important? How do you guys help it? How is everything connected? So you can do this just for us on the Cape's ecosystem, or you can look for your own. And it's totally up to you. So I'm gonna look through, see if we have any questions. But I don't think we really do. Let's see. Oh, let's see, so we have some people in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in North Carolina. So if you don't know that much about our ecosystem, you can try based on the information that we gave you, but we would love, love, love to see some of the ecosystems that you guys have. So try to do it with what you're familiar with. And thank you guys so, so much for popping on today. And I hope you have a lovely day. Enjoy the sunshine. Bye.